So you're sitting again in an all-day Zazen Kai. It seems like a month goes by really fast now. And so you have a lot of time to calm down your mind. You can do that by counting breaths, following breaths, or sitting quietly and letting everything fall away. Since you have time today, I'd like to ask you a question. If you were going to explain Buddhism to someone who's never heard of it and knew none of the terminology of Buddhism, how would you do it? Suppose this person is just interested in the idea of meditation, but beyond that doesn't have a clue about any of the words. So how would you explain Buddhism in your own words rather than in terminology? For that matter, we chant the sutras in services on Saturday morning. And suppose someone asks you about the Heart Sutra. How will you explain without falling back on terminology, special words to explain? And to test your understanding of it, how would you put the first line of the sutra, for example, in your own words? Avalokiteshvara, when coursing deeply prajnaparamita, so clearly that all 5 skandhas are empty and thus relieved all suffering. You've been sitting meditation for a few years now, so you probably would have a pretty good understanding of how to talk about that. When they first did this line, all 5 Skylanders came out from the dictation. And it added those relieved, and those relieved all suffering. You've been sitting meditation for a few years now, so think about how you would explain such a thing to someone who doesn't have any interest or knowledge of special words. I think that when we fall back on Buddhist words only, it's a kind of lazy way to explain what we really understand. So maybe it's time to start to think about putting terminology aside at least a little and think carefully about the words you'd use to describe meditation, for example, or Zen to someone with no knowledge of it at all. To do this, I think we have to put aside our sense of reverence for terminology and special words of Buddhist life, and remember that we carry the knowledge of all of this within us. To begin to speak about, using words of your own rather than using the acquired over time revered words of Buddhism. Remember that you are Buddha nature yourself, so let it out to express what you are coming to understand. Do you understand this? To understand this, you have to realize that the Buddha nature within you is true, and that given that the ego is removed by practice and discipline to become an ally of the self, Buddha nature can begin to operate within each of your lives with our cooperation to stop blocking it. And if you don't think you can do this, try doing it partially and you may surprise yourself. I think you have the knowledge already in your minds and what you understand or coming to understand, but don't believe you can do it just yet. So speak in your own words by using a few words like meditation, prajnaparamita, or bodhisattva, explaining that within your own words to begin with. In other words, I think you could do it in your own words if you had to, and if you realize that anyone can use their own words rather than the revered words of Buddhism to explain what's really meaningful to you in this practice. And here you are sitting all day, so it's okay to consider while you're sitting how to express your confidence in a Buddhist world. Remember that you have Buddha nature inside, so let it out to express what you are already coming to understand. And thank you for listening.
Any comments, questions,
Or additions?
additions?
Mike?
You're psychic. I just had this conversation with a friend of mine that I've known since the 6th grade in school. We went through all the crazies and stuff like that and stuff. And in fact, I was over at his house over the 4th of July weekend. And he asked me, why are you doing this? Why are you, what motivates you to go this way? Because I never considered you a religious person. I said, well, first of all, it's not a religion. I said, it's a technique of living in which you can control the way you react to everything. And I said, that's all you've got. You can't stop the world from doing this craziness. And, I explained to him that I do Zazen Kais and stuff like this, and we know each other's secrets, but he just couldn't figure this out. And it was a real tough thing because I wasn't trying to convert him, but I was trying to get him to understand why I dedicated my time to this. And I almost said, I don't know. I thought I was just chicking out and go, I don't know, whatever. But I think I got him to understand that, first of all, it's a calling. It really is something that you feel inside you that says, this is the way I want to go. And it doesn't mean you're not qualified to do it, but I said it's a little easier when you feel that you're drawn to it, which I was. And I just said, it's just a way of looking at life where you're not attached to the results of your actions. You do want the results. If you're trying to fix a car, you want to fix the car. But you don't run around the street going, look what I did, I fixed the car. Just do it. And it was difficult. I still think, he still kind of looks at me like, I never saw this coming, But I think he understood what I was trying to say was that most of our suffering is mental. We cause it. It's because of how we interpret the world. You can still take care of all your duties, take care of everything you have to do every day, and you can not like somebody, you can like somebody. Just don't get hung up on it and keep it going for a couple of days or something. And I said, I'm stubborn, so I do it I go to, do Zazen Kais all day to try and get my mind to calm back down and get out of that frame and get back into the moment. I said, that's the whole thing. It's the moment we have now. And I will stop talking because I could go for hours. This conversation went for 3 hours. So.
Yeah, that's good that you tried, Mike. The thing is, if we're open again and people start to come again, there may be people who come and don't have any idea what we're doing, as far as they might have some idea that we're going to sit on a cushion, but don't really know what we talk about when we listen to sutras and talk about them in practices and in dokusans. When we bring them up, we try not to use special words to do it, because when you do that, the special words alienate the person or isolate them from you. It's like putting a tank between the two of you. So there's no way you can really talk to someone about practice unless you begin to do it in your own words. I think it's good that you gave it a try. 3 hours is not very long when you're talking about something very meaningful to you. Yeah, well, I was sitting there and Emma said, how long is your talk today? And I said, I think about 5 minutes. But I hope we will fill in the rest of the time with your questions, because I really would like to hear you start talking about Buddhism from your heart rather than from the book. I think you're actually all ready to do that.
really.
You've been sitting a long time and listening to talks a long time, and I really think you're ready to start to do it. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I realize that this is a very foreign subject to people. I mean, just a little side I heard on the news the other day, there was some poor lady lost her house in a fire in Riverside, and usually people, if they evoke religion or something, say, oh, God will save me, all this stuff. And she looks at the camera and goes, and she was smiling, she goes, Buddha taught me things come and things go. It's the first time I ever heard somebody say a Buddhist thing when a disaster happens and stuff.
That was nice.
And I have conversations with my brother who's a devout Christian who just can't figure out why I'm doing this and stuff. And we've been talking for 30 years. When I went and visited him a couple months ago, we spent the whole day and his wife's going, you guys are going to get in an argument. I said, no, we've been doing this for years. You know, we just test each other and stuff. My thing is that I have to find that balance between Buddhist and psychology or something, you know, where I speak a lot in more generic terms than in Buddhist terms, and I don't want to do that to my friends because they have no idea what this is all about. So
Well,
it's something I've been working on.
I read a long, long time ago, said by a mathematician who said, if you understand something, you can explain it to a 5-year-old. In other words, I think you are all ready to explain Buddhism to people. I think you understand more than you understand, and more than you realize you understand. And you should practice doing it, you know, explaining things to people or even to yourselves about what you understand in practice. Using only your own words to explain it from the heart. I really think you're all ready to do it. I'd love to hear your explanations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Matt.
Matt,
Hi. I had a experience I'd like to share. Before I found you guys, Peter and Jane, and the center, I was looking for a teacher. It had been a long while since I had had one, and I was interviewing them, and I was speaking to a Korean Zen teacher, and I asked him what would be the difference between my going to a class to learn relaxation techniques and coming to you and being involved with Zen Buddhism. And he had a wonderful answer. He said, compassion. Learning much more about compassion. And although I didn't study with him, I've come to understand that in a much different way than I did prior to coming back to you or finding you folks, all of you.
yeah. Even compassion is an interesting word to see if you could explain what compassion means in your own words. Just think of every term that you find like emptiness, even bodhisattva. Most of you feel you can explain what bodhisattva means, but can you say it without any special words?
Are you asking me to do that now?
Anybody, you too, Matt.
Yeah, for myself, at this stage in my practice, compassion for me is the state of, I don't know if I could call it feeling, awareness, and then the active response is loving kindness. And what happens is, with compassion, there's not a desire to act on behalf of someone's need, but there's simply the movement. It doesn't come, I can't say it comes from me. It's not out of a necessarily a desire to, an ego-centered desire. It's simply, there's like a vacuum where the need is, and I am, whatever action I respond to, whatever loving kindness I respond with, simply is something that moves towards the vacuum to fill it. It's not it doesn't involve map really. So that's, but the compassion is simply a recognition, and then, that's just how I use the language to describe it to myself, I guess.
Okay. So everybody is so quiet today that I think you must all understand this totally. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Sandy.
When I first was practicing here, and I had been working at the library in Chatsworth, there was this guy that came in all the time, and into the little store that I worked in, and he would bug me and ask me about my Buddhist practice, because I had mentioned at one time in a conversation with him that I had been studying Buddhism, since I was in elementary school, and I really enjoyed it, and it was the only thing I'd come across that made any sense to me, because my Christian or my Catholic father and my Jewish mother, both of the ideas of those two religions never did anything for me. They kind of repelled me. And so he kept asking me and asking me these things. And I was trying to explain to him that at the point I was at, because it was relatively new in my Zen practice, that the only way I could describe it and why I was there was, well, I said, I've always been attracted to Buddhism. There's something about the practice uh, that allows you to see yourself and allows you to live a better life. And so then he wouldn't think that was enough, and he'd keep bugging and bugging and bugging. And I told him that the only way I can really describe it to you is it's something you have to experience. And then once you experience it, then you'll begin to understand it. And it's at this point, all I can do is do my practice and experience it and see what happens. And if I'm going to want to stay there, if I'm not going to want to stay there, but I can't do anything to really describe it to you other than it's based on meditation. And he eventually gave up, finally coming in and bugging me. But he was doing it not to be friendly or not to, he was just one of these, I don't know, he was kind of like an obnoxious sort of person. But, oh, you were talking about compassion. Uh, Compassion to me is where you recognize yourself and the other are really one and the same, and that you can experience their feelings, their pain, um, and it's a connection, and that connection allows you to um, be more careful in your interaction, to to explain things to them or to say things to them that will help rather than hinder. And it's just something that seems to bloom out of sitting, compassion for others and for being in a sangha. Uh, you learn that. I mean, we get taught we're supposed to be nice to other people when we're young and all that. And in school, we're supposed to behave and, not hurt each other, not bully each other. But compassion actually didn't appear in my life until I came to Zen Buddhism. And I mean, I liked other people and always tried to be nice, but it wasn't an act of compassion. It was I never looked at it as an act of compassion was for someone who was hurting and you were feeling their pain and you wanted to help them because you want to reach out because they're you and you are them. And that's the attitude with everything and everyone. That's the way it should be. We're a part of each other. Uh, and we should care for each other. It's anytime we detect someone is suffering, we should try to um, basically give them a hand of, you know, uh, try to elevate their depression or whatever. But it's just something that seems to grow and grow as you continue through the years of practice. How you look at people, how you look at others, how you look at animals, how you look at bugs. you know. So it's always been relatively hard sometimes for me to sit down and tell somebody this is the practice, uh, even using my own words. It's something. The practice has always been something to me that's more mental than verbal. Uh, it's something you have to experience, and that experience changes your life.
Okay, Mark?
Oh, I believe Heckmet wanted to ask something.
Be quiet.
No,
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw you raise your hand. Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Chris.
Mar-
Mark?
Heckmeck doesn't want to go. Let's see. He's there.
No,
Anyone can go ahead of me if they want. I'm just putting my hand up.
no, Chris thought his hand was up, but it was, he said it wasn't.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to try to do a little plagiarism here. And this is what you said. Explain something as a 5-year-old would or could understand. And how about this?
Okay. And
A twirling flower.
So I'm stealing from the Buddha himself, but and just reminding us of that lecture that he did, the famous one with just the flower. And I think by really staying in touch with what the basics are, the real, where does I guess the rubber meet the road? Where does it, where do we really connect in our heart? Then we can explain almost anything, but yet, and it's really a good idea to think that way because there's so many things we trip ourselves up on the details and trying to explain the details when the details need to be explained by our own experience um and our own frame of reference. And that's what I have to say. So thank you so much.
you're welcome. John?
Good morning, everybody. I figured I would jump in and give my layman term definition. This comes up quite a bit. You guys when people find out that you meditate or practice Zen or Buddhism, there's always the questions, what is that about, and so forth. So the way that I describe it in layman terms to people is kind of what Peter discussed the last time about the five skandhas are empty, and what Jane talked about. And that's this, that in my estimations, to put aside the word suffering, which we're trying to not use Buddhist words, mental anguish, anxiety, these things are generated by our thoughts, our feelings, ourselves. The five skandhas are everything, but everything that we experience exists outside of our perceptions and our thoughts and our feelings. And it's only our perceptions, our thoughts, and our feelings of those things that create mental anguish for us. And so it's only when we are able to separate the skandhas, everything that there is, all that we experience, when we can separate that from ourselves, not to use the word self, the Buddhist word, but rather when we can separate that from our perceptions, our thoughts, our feelings, and we can look at it from a perspective that isn't quite so contained, but almost as a third person, then we can begin to live our lives in a way where we aren't controlled by our thoughts and our feelings, and we're able to experience everything that happens around us, all the form. We're able to experience that in a way that it actually is, rather than in the way that we are using our habits, our past experiences, and all of our anxieties and thoughts and feelings stuck into that and making it into a mix. And then that's what we experience. It's not that. And when we learn that, that's the practice. Learning that for me is the practice. Learning that our thoughts and our feelings about things are not real. They're tools we developed over time to help us to survive, but they are not us. And when we separate from that, that's what the practice is. And then as far as compassion goes, what my definition of compassion would be, my definition of compassion is that's the action of loving kindness. And not to use the term loving kindness, a Buddhist term, for me, loving kindness is a complete giving up of oneself for the benefit of another. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, Jane. I look forward to your thoughts.
Thank you, John. I think everybody touches on compassion from a different angle, but you all touch on it, which is nice. Peter, what would you like to say?
I was looking at John there. He's, looks like a puppy dog there.
I apologize. My back
like?
is destroyed. I apologize. I forgot to turn on. My back is so destroyed. I
Matt?
apologize.
Okay, thank you. Matt, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly add that, and Mark holding up the flower kind of triggered this. The response that I described for me in filling that vacuum is it's not so much that I feel that I'm feeling pain for the other person. It's that I'm just moved to act, and that action is. I understand much better now when teachers talk about intimacy. The action is an intimate thing, and it's almost like a dance in terms of awareness of the need and just moving with it in a way so as to assist in any way possible to diminish whatever pain another is experiencing. That's it. that was much longer than I thought.
Oh, thank you, Peter.
Okay. Oh, let Steve go first.
Steve, is your hand up?
You think after all this time I'd know where the mute button is. Compassion for me, the simplest way to put it is, uh, uh, in my experience, I was told by a relative one time that us Hansons had no compassion for anybody. And maybe her experience with us may be true, maybe not. But the only way I can describe compassion for me is telling you that there's an old guy down the street that his wife passed away, and we met him 3 years ago through my mother-in-law, and my father-in-law knew them as friends. And so he became part of our friends. And when his wife passed away, I know that as a single person, it is very difficult to eat properly when you're by yourself. My wife can go away for a few days. I cook dinner every night. She goes away and I find myself struggling to eat. So every night I make sure that we make a little extra and bring it down to them every day. And so that's compassion to me, is helping another human being get by in this life. That's all I can say. And without probably my meditation and being involved in the Buddhist family, that may have never happened. It may have, but I think that this has helped me open up things that I have never seen in myself, that helps induce a better person, myself, even though myself doesn't exist. So that's all I can tell you.
Oh, thank you, Steve. That doesn't.
Jane called on me, but I have nothing to say. So
I'm just wondering if you want to talk about the 5 Skylanders
oh no, 5 Skylanders, yeah.
or cutting grass.
There's one thing I was going to actually. Now I remember what I wanted to say previously, is that when Jane was making this talk, and we and I saw it, is that we get Buddhist terminology, which of course, as you know, I often talk about. Kind of feel that it's good to explain to you what Buddhism thinks, if I can attempt to. But actually, the explanations are something that people made up to explain what can't be explained really well. Because it can only be, each of us can only experience within our own world, and we can only experience what our own changes are. And so, if you could, you might hear something like object in the subject and object are one. There's one right there. That's a Buddhist axiomatic thing to say, but in fact, what that means perhaps is nothing to being one. Is that it means that you no longer feel separateness. And so you'd think you were talking about oneness, but actually it's something very, very different. So it's always a surprise when you find out what they're really referring to, because it really has nothing to do with the words that they've been speaking. So you can always remember that about when you hear people like myself talk, is that we're using metaphors for something that metaphors don't really apply to. So you have to make up the metaphor. So Buddha Dharma is something made up. And so therefore, knowing the Buddhist Dharma is not necessary. What's necessary is really knowing yourself. And when you really know yourself, then you're able to know other people.
Thanks.
Okay, that's okay.
Can
Rachel's
you see-
got a
okay, can you
point.
see somebody saying, what's a metaphor? Rachel,
Well, I just wanted to mention that I guess I have the advantage that for 20, 25 years, I studied with a teacher who, even though she knew all those things, um, was pretty scrupulous about not referencing anything to the sutras. She occasionally would refer to a koan. I don't know if she said koan. I mean, her emphasis was on direct, simple speech. And that's why lots of people thought she was just talking about psychology. But that trained me so that now I'd say in the last 10 years, I visited different groups and I have felt so ignorant because I might have read the books, but I'm not fluent, in referring to the literature. I can't just rattle off anything. And what that did is it reminded me of poetry. I've written over the years, and I just am not going to explain a poem. And if someone I try to make how I live, how I talk, what I do, what I don't do, evidence of more, if anyone's interested. And people do occasionally ask, and I'll just suggest they investigate. And if the only thing is someone really pushes me, they don't usually, I've never had anyone ask me, what is Buddhism? I live in an area where what do you want? Yoga? Do you want to go to Christian meditation? I've never rehearsed anyone that was ignorant. But if someone does sort of nudge me, I really have said and mean it with all my heart. I get up and I sit down and I shut up for half an hour. And you'd be surprised what you can learn. Now, they always laugh. Everybody enjoys that. But I mean it. I love to talk, but I don't like to explain poems, and I don't like to, the poems I may write or even anyone else's, and Buddhism. I really do try to make how I live an example of how helpful it is to not say anything for half an hour. Thank you, Jane.
thanks, Rachel. I enjoyed that very much.
Okay.
Say anything for half an hour is a miracle for everybody. I was going to ask you, if you have had a beloved pet, how would you explain your love for that pet?
Aren't you ready for lunch?
Is that a booze question?
We have to do service and then lunch.
Service time.
When
Okay,
the
we
dog
can
wants
stop
to
it.
play, when the dog
Jane
wants
will
to
give me
play,
jokes on this afternoon, and so therefore,
Oh, wait a minute, I want to hear it.
Arvin's
Arvin.
trying to talk.
Go ahead, Arvin.
when the dog wants to play, there are just two dogs playing.
good.
Is that a poem?
That's a fact.
Almost a haiku.
Almost a haiku, that's true. It's correct, Mike. Okay, thank you, everybody.